downtown Sylacauga this morning. As we turn now to obituaries, brought to you by Curtis & Son Funeral Home, the North Chapel on Highway 21 in Sylacauga, and the Childersburg Chapel on Highway 280 in Childersburg. For pre-need funerals, burials, or cremation since 1975, Curtis & Son Funeral Home, Sylacauga, Childersburg. Mr. Bernie Mitchell Wesson, age 80, of Childersburg, died Saturday at his residence. Visitation for Mr. Wesson will be tonight from 5 till 8 o'clock at Curtis & Son Funeral Home, Childersburg Chapel. Of course, the graveside service tomorrow is private. Online condolences to the Wesson family at curtisonfunerals.com. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, Childersburg Chapel, in charge of the arrangements. In other obituary news on this a Wednesday morning, J. Lee Worley, age 12, died September the 24th. Funeral service will be today at 1 o'clock from Curtis & Son Funeral Home, North Chapel, with burial in the Fayetteville Methodist Church Cemetery. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, North Chapel, directing that service. Ricky Stidham died on Tuesday. Curtis & Son Funeral Home, North Chapel, will announce the arrangements. Funeral arrangements to be announced as well for Mr. John Pender. Mr. Pender, those funeral arrangements will be announced by Curtis & Son Funeral Home, North Chapel. Funeral service for Noble Twyman will be September the 30th at 1 o'clock from Community Funeral Home Chapel in Sylacauga, with burial in the Tallahatchie Baptist Church Cemetery of Childersburg. The station is today at the funeral home, Community Funeral Home, Sylacauga, directing. Memorial service for Mark Daniel Alley, age 52, of Sylacauga, will be Thursday at 10 a.m. from Radley Smith Funeral Home Chapel, with Brother James Gallup's officiating. Mr. Alley died Saturday, September 25th. Radley Smith Funeral Home in Sylacauga, in charge of the arrangements. Funeral service for Zay Bunt. Zay Bunt, age 21. Funeral service will be today at 2 o'clock from the chapel of Radley Smith Funeral Home, with the Reverend Rodney Frost officiating. Burial in the Tallahatchie Cemetery in Alpine. Mr. Bunt died Saturday, September 25th. Visitation prior to the service today, noon until 2 o'clock at the funeral home, Radley Smith Funeral Home in Sylacauga, directing. And Zay, his father was Jay Bunt, and Jay was in my youth group years ago, and Jay passed away several years ago as well. So now then it is his son, Zay Bunt, age 21. Homegoing service celebrating the life of Mr. Jeffrey Calhoun, age 37, of Alpine, is today at 2 o'clock from S.M. Goodson Funeral Home Chapel in Talladega, with Pastor James Marbury officiating. Interment in the Calhoun Moore Cemetery of Alpine. S.M. Goodson Funeral Home and Crematory directing. Funeral arrangements will be announced for Rose M. White, age 79. Ms. White died on Monday. S.M. Goodson Funeral Home announcing. Funeral service for Mr. Willie Frank Tuck Sr., age 86, of Alexander City, will be Thursday, September 30th at Armour's Memorial Chapel in Alexander City at 11 a.m. Burial in the Alexander City Cemetery. Visitation is today at the funeral home from 4 till 7. Final arrangements entrusted to Armour's Memorial Funeral Home, Alexander City. Mrs. Vicki Graham Niemans, formerly of Alexander City, she passed away September 24th in Atlanta. Funeral service will be 2 o'clock Saturday, October 2nd at Perfect Peace Baptist Church in Alexander City, with burial in the Armour's Memorial Garden. Visitation is Friday from 4 till 7 at the funeral home. Final arrangements entrusted to Armour's Memorial Funeral Home of Alexander City. This obituary report this morning brought to you by Curtis & Son Funeral Home, the North Chapel on Highway 21 in Sylacauga, and the Childersburg Chapel on Highway 280 in Childersburg. For pre-need funerals, burials, or cremation since 1975, Curtis & Son Funeral Home, Sylacauga, Childersburg.